Sin, actions by which humans rebelled against Yahuwah, miss his purpose for their life, and surrender to the power of evil rather than to Yahuwah. Sin as rebellion. One of the central affirmations throughout the Torah Bible is humanity's estrangement from Yahuwah. The cause for this estrangement is sin, the root cause of all the problems of humanity. It describes sin as an attitude that personifies sin as rebellion against Yahuwah. Rebellion was at the root of the problem for Adam and Eve, Genesis, Bereshit 3, and has been at the root of humanity's plight ever since. Sin's origin in humanity's rebellious nature. Human sin is universal. We all sin. All persons without exception are under sin's dominion. Romans 3 verses 9 through 23. How did this come about? The Bible has no philosophical argument as such concerning sin's origin. Yahuwah is in no way responsible for sin. Satan introduced sin when he beguiled Eve, but the Bible does not teach that sin had its origin with him either. Sin's origin is to be found in humanity's rebellious nature. Since Adam and Eve rebelled against the clear command of Yahuwah, sin has infected humanity like a dreaded malignancy. The Torah sets forth no systematic rationale as to how the human race was and is infected by this dread malady. Some passages such as Psalm 51 verse 5, Ephesians 2 verse 3 could be interpreted to mean that this sinful nature is inherited. Other passages seem to affirm that sin is due to human choice. See Ezekiel 18 verses 4 and 19 through 20, Romans 1 verses 18 through 20, and 5 verse 12. What then is the answer to this dilemma? A possible answer is the fact that the Jewish mind had no problem in admitting two mutually exclusive ideas into the same system of thought. Any idea that humanity inherits a sinful nature must be coupled with the corollary that every person is indeed responsible for his or her choice of sin. Another possibility for understanding how sin has infected all of humanity may be found in the biblical understanding of the corporateness and solidarity of the human race. This understanding of the human situation would say that when Adam rebelled against Yahuwah, he incorporated all of his descendants in his action. See Hebrews 7 verses 9 through 10 for a similar analogy. This view certainly does not eliminate the necessity for each individual to accept full responsibility for sinful acts. Adam and Eve introduced sin into human history by their rebellious actions. The Torah affirms that every person who has lived since has followed their example. Whatever else one may say about sin's origin, this much is surely affirmed throughout the Bible. The Bible views sin from various perspectives. One concept of sin in the Old Testament is that of transgression of the law. Yahuwah established the law as a standard of righteousness. Any violation of this standard is defined as sin. Deuteronomy 6 verses 24 through 25 is a statement of this principle from the perspective that a person who keeps the law is righteous. The implication is that the person who does not keep the law is not righteous. That is sinful. Another concept of sin in the Old Testament is as breach of the covenant. Yahuwah made a covenant with the nation of Israel. They were bound by this covenant as a people. Exodus 19 verse 24. Exodus chapter 19 and chapter 24 and Joshua chapter 24. Each year on the Day of Atonement, the nation went through a covenant renewal when the high priest consecrated the people by sprinkling them with the blood of the atoning sacrifice. They renewed their vows to Yahuwah to be a covenant-keeping people. Any breach of this covenant was viewed as sin. Deuteronomy 29, verses 19 through 21. The Old Testament also pictures sin as a violation of the righteous nature of Yahuwah. As a righteous and holy God, he sets forth as a criteria for his people a righteousness like his own. Leviticus 11, verse 45. Any deviation from Yahuwah's own righteousness is viewed as sin. The Old Testament has a rich vocabulary for sin. Chata, C-H-A-T-A, means to miss the mark, as does the Greek hamartia, H-A-M-A-R-T-I-A. The word could be used to describe a person shooting a bow and arrow and missing the target with the arrow. When it is used to describe sin, it means that the person has missed the mark that Yahuwah has established for the person's life. Aven, A-V-E-N, describes the crooked or perverse spirit associated with sin. Sinful persons have perverted their spirits and become crooked rather than straight. Ra, R-A, describes the violence associated with sin. It also has a connotation of the breaking out of evil. Sin is the opposite of righteousness or moral straightness in the Old Testament. The New Testament perspective of sin. The New Testament picture is much like that of the Old Testament. Several of the words used for sin in the New Testament have almost the same meaning as some of the Hebrew words used in the Old Testament. The most notable advancement in the New Testament view of sin is the fact that sin is defined against the backdrop of Yahushua as the standard for righteousness. His life exemplifies perfection. The exalted purity of his life creates the norm for judging what is sinful. In the New Testament, sin also is viewed as a lack of fellowship with Yahuwah. The ideal life is one of fellowship with Yahuwah. Anything which disturbs or distorts this fellowship is sin. The New Testament view of sin is somewhat more subjective than objective. Yahushua taught quite forcibly that sin is a condition of the heart. He traced sin directly to inner motives, stating that the sinful thought leading to the overt act is a real sin. The outward deed is actually the fruit of sin. Anger in the heart is the same as murder, Matthew 5, verses 21 through 22. The impure look is tantamount to adultery, Matthew 5, verse 27 to 28. The real defilement in a person stems from the inner person heart, which is sinful. Matthew 15, verses 18 through 20. Sin, therefore, is understood as involving the essential being of a person, that is, the essential essence of human nature. The New Testament interprets sin as unbelief. However, unbelief is not just the rejection of a dogma or a creed. Rather, it is the rejection of that spiritual light which has been revealed in Yahushua HaMashiach. Or from another perspective, unbelief is the rejection of the supreme revelation as it is found in the person of Yahushua HaMashiach. Unbelief is resistance to the truth of Yahuwah revealed by the Spirit of Yahuwah and produces moral and spiritual blindness. The outcome of such rejection is judgment. The only criteria for judgment is whether or not one has accepted or rejected the revelation of Yahuwah as found in Yahushua HaMashiach, John 3, verses 18 through 19, chapter 16, verses 18 through 16. The New Testament further pictures sin as being revealed by the law of Moses. The law was preparatory, and its function was to point to Messiah. The law revealed sin in its true character, but this only aroused in humanity a desire to experience the forbidden fruit of sin. The law as such is not bad, but humanity simply does not have the ability to keep the law. Therefore, the law offers no means of salvation. Rather, it leaves humanity with a deep sense of sin and guilt. Romans 7. The law therefore serves to bring sin into bold release so that it is clearly perceptible.